Did you ever wonder what would happen if Sengoku didn't stop Garp from attacking Akainu? Who would win in the battle between these two? And what would happen to Garp afterward? Now, for this scenario to happen, we'll assume that Sengoku was busy fighting someone else, or he simply wasn't paying attention, which gave Garp the chance to sneak up to Akainu. So the first thing we need to establish is Garp even strong enough to do anything significant to Akainu? Well, considering he was the Pirate King's #1 rival, and that he was offered to become an admiral many times before, we know that Garp is monstrously strong. Even in his old age, he still managed to invade Hachinosu and overpower Kuzan, which is, well, pretty damn impressive. On top of all of that, it's also important to mention that Akainu wouldn't expect this betrayal from Garp, meaning the Vice Admiral would have an element of surprise. So yeah, it's pretty clear that Garp is more than strong enough to defeat Akainu, and when Sengoku isn't looking, he would jump straight toward him and hit him with the full-power Galaxy Punch, shaking the entire island in the process. From this point on, there are 3 different ways the story could continue. So let's go through each one and see what kind of world-changing consequences would this action bring. In the first scenario, after the initial attack hits Akainu, enraged Garp would just continue relentlessly punching him while he's on the ground. At this point, Garp wouldn't think clearly about any punishment or consequences that may arise from this, and his sole goal would be to kill the Admiral. It's also possible that Whitebeard would come to help him out, as he too is enraged and can't control himself. Now, it's important to mention that Garp and Whitebeard wouldn't really be teaming up here. They just happen to have a common enemy. Their combined punches would leave no time for Akainu to defend, counterattack, or escape, and eventually, Garp would finish him off and kill him. And although that's kinda a good thing, how would the rest of the war go considering this major change? Well, it's safe to assume that Blackbeard would still show up to end Whitebeard and take his fruit. The Marines would be conflicted, not knowing what to do about Garp, and Kobe would be devastated witnessing his mentor murdering someone, as in the original story. Shanks would come to end the war, though his arrival wouldn't be as epic now considering Akainu is not a threat anymore. 2 big changes here are that Luffy wouldn't get his iconic scar, as Akainu isn't alive to punch him, and due to the Marineford War being broadcasted, the entire world would see what Garp did. This would put the world government in a really bad light and infuriate Gorosei. But by now you must be wondering, what will happen to Garp after this? Will he continue being a Marine? Well, before we answer that, I wanted to ask you something. Did you ever wonder why are some of the strongest One Piece characters napping all the time? Well, it's simple. Good sleep literally makes you superhuman. I mean, just look at the benefits. And if you want to improve your sleep too, you can do it with today's sponsor, Manta Sleep. Over this past month, I've been using this sleep mask they've sent me, and it's incredible. You look cool while wearing it, fall asleep faster, it's comfortable, and my favorite thing is this cooling fabric around the eyes, which keeps them cool throughout the night. Something's telling me 𝐿KIJI would like these. Check out Manta Sleep by clicking the link in the description, and make sure to use code Yeagerists for 10% off your order. After calming down and realizing what he did, Garp would feel like a failure. Garp knows what's right and what's wrong very well, but sadly, he let the rage get the best of him. He wouldn't attempt to resist or fight other Marines to escape, he would just surrender and let them take him away. So, what's the punishment for this atrocious crime? Well, we don't really know. Nobody in the story so far has ever done something like this, but there's one clue in the manga that can help us guess what would happen to Garp here. You see, during one of Garp's conversations with Sengoku, the fleet admiral told him that the only reason he is still a Marine is because of his past achievements and because people around the world like him. So, after everyone around the world witnesses Garp killing an admiral, the world government will have absolutely no reason to keep him around and would want to get rid of him. On top of that, Garp is a member of the D clan, known to create huge problems for the government, which is another reason not to keep him alive. This is why instead of jail time, Garp would immediately be sentenced to public execution. He wouldn't protest in the slightest and would accept his punishment. In the end, he would die in a similar manner to Roger, just without the cool speech. Now, Garp may be dead here, but that's still not the end of this scenario, because with both him and Akainu gone, the world would change significantly. So, you know how 𝐿KIJI and Akainu fought to see who would become the new fleet admiral? Well, with Akainu gone, the world government higher-ups would desperately try to find another candidate other than 𝐿KIJI. Kizaru would be a good choice, but I don't think he would agree to fight over some kind of title, because that's just not like him. And besides Kizaru, whoever else they decide to pick has a 0% chance of defeating 𝐿KIJI. so he'd become the new fleet admiral. And trust me, this is not a small change, as Aokiji's and Akainu's views on justice are completely different. First of all, Aokiji is a lot more forgiving and understanding, which would overall make the entire Marines more fair. Also, due to his character, it's hard to believe that he would let someone like Green Bull become an admiral, and it's more likely that someone different will fill this spot. However, not everything is as good as it seems, as this development will also lead to two heartbreaking events. One of those is that Smoker and the rest of his team would get killed on Punk Hazard by 𝐕𝗲𝗏𝗏𝗏 because 𝐂𝐮�R𝐼R never joined the Blackbeard Pirates and wouldn't be there to save them. The other is that Kobe would most likely die on Hachinosu as Garp isn't alive to rescue him. Okay, this scenario went pretty badly, but there are still 2 more scenarios left to cover, and I can't wait for you guys to see what will happen in the last one. But before that, let's cover the second scenario, which is even worse than the previous one. Here, we'll assume that after getting hit by Garp, Akainu doesn't immediately go down and manages to stay on his feet. Now, this isn't too hard to imagine, as even Aokiji managed to tank multiple punches from Garp when they battled on Hachinosu. Okay, but how does this change anything? Well, you see, if Akainu is still conscious after this attack, it's not like he just stand there and wait for Garp to beat him up, and would most likely try to escape. After tanking some punches, he would counterattack with his Great Eruption attack, and while Garp blocks it, he would use his 𝐿𝐿𝐽𝐴 abilities to hide inside the ground, same as he did in the original story when Whitebeard was attacking him. From here on, Akainu would stay in hiding and wait for Sengoku and the others to calm Garp down. In the meantime, Blackbeard also arrives on the island and kills Whitebeard, and overall the war ends pretty similarly to the canon version, minus Luffy's scar. Now, although Garp didn't kill an admiral in this scenario, he still tried to do it, and will be sent to Impel Down shortly after the war. As we already discussed, the world government doesn't really like Garp, and would rather have him executed. However, since he didn't actually kill anyone this time around, I believe many people around the world would oppose this decision, as they still view Garp as a hero and a legend. Not wanting to risk people turning against them, the world government wouldn't go through with the execution, and would decide to leave him in prison. Knowing what he did was wrong, Garp wouldn't try to escape and would agree to stay locked up. Okay, that's pretty sad. But now that Akainu survived, who would win the duel and become the new fleet admiral? One important thing to remember here is how close the duel between Aokiji and Akainu actually was. I mean, the two of them fought for literally 10 days until Akainu won. Since both admirals are alive, this duel would still happen even in this scenario. But this time around, Aokiji would be a big favorite due to all the damage Akainu took during the war. Even if the government gives him time to recover, it's not like he'll ever be the same after taking the Galaxy Punch. Now, don't get me wrong, this duel would still be insanely close, but I'm certain Aokiji would manage to win this time and get promoted. From here on, everything would go the same as in the previous scenario with Smoker dying and Green Bull never becoming an admiral. Oh, also, I believe Akainu would still continue being an admiral as his only goal is to catch as many pirates as possible. So it's not like he has anywhere else to go. With this covered, we have only one more scenario left, and this last one is the most interesting by far, and the scenario that we all secretly wanted to happen. Same as in the first one, we'll assume that Garp managed to catch Akainu off guard and kill him. However, this time, instead of letting the Marines capture him, he would hold his ground and try to escape. One reason he may do this is because after seeing Ace die, Garp would want to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen to anyone else he cares about, like Luffy or Kobe. And if he wants to be there for them, he can't spend the rest of his life in prison. Now, you may be thinking that escaping Marineford is crazy because it's filled with Marines, but there's one thing you're forgetting. You see, Monkey D. Garp is a legend within the Marines, and many soldiers look up to him. This is why I believe a lot of them wouldn't even try to stop Garp and would stay away. And let's be honest, even if some Marines tried to stop him, it's not like they could ever hope to do any real damage to him. The only ones capable of actually stopping Garp here are either admirals, warlords, or Sengoku. We already know that warlords didn't really care about this war that much, so it's unlikely any of them would go out of their way to chase Garp. Aokiji also wouldn't want to fight his old teacher and would probably just look the other way. Sengoku seems the most qualified to fight Garp here because at the end of the day, it's his responsibility to keep the Marines in order. Also, it would be thematically fitting considering Sengoku is also a veteran Marine of the previous era, same as Garp. Now, based on what we've seen so far in the series, Garp should be stronger than Sengoku, right? Yeah, but there's a problem. You see, although Garp betrayed the Marines by killing Akainu, he's not the bad guy, and he wouldn't just go all out and attack Sengoku. It's more likely that he would just attempt to dodge his attacks as much as possible and focus on escaping. So, would he be able to do it? Well, if it's only Sengoku chasing Garp, I'm sure he would have no problem escaping. But there's actually another guy on the battlefield who would also join the chase, Admiral 𝐕𝐲𝗎. Contrary to Aokiji, 𝐕𝐲𝗎 doesn't really care what happens to Garp, and if he's ordered to stop him, I just don't see him refusing the order. With these two now after him, Garp would eventually be overwhelmed and captured. So, wait, if Garp was captured anyway, doesn't that mean this scenario is pretty much the same as the first one? Well, no, because there's one big difference now. This time around, Garp wants to live and be there for his family, so he wouldn't just let the Marines execute him and would try to escape instead. But how is he going to pull that off? Well, due to the immense respect Garp holds within the Marines, it's quite possible that some of his former students like Aokiji would help him escape in some way, maybe by loosening his cuffs a bit or leaving the cell open. But even if that doesn't happen, it's important to remember that Garp is one of the strongest hockey users in the story, which means it's pretty much impossible to keep him imprisoned. Also, he's not a devil fruit user, meaning sea stone cuffs aren't going to stop him either. I mean, just imagine someone like Garp being put on an execution stand tied with chains. He's breaking those in no time. So Garp managed to escape. That's great! But what would happen to him now that he's on the run? Being a high-ranking Marine for the majority of his life, Garp surely knows many of the government's secrets. One of those is the God Valley incident, a secret that the government tried so hard to bury for years. This is why Garp would quickly become one of the most wanted men on the seas. Maybe not the most wanted one because that spot is reserved for Dragon, but I believe he would be a close second. But how high would his bounty be? First of all, I think it's obvious that Garp's bounty would be higher than those of the Emperor's, simply because he is way too powerful and knows way too much. After looking at current Emperor's bounties, I think it's safe to say that Garp's bounty could easily go as high as 5 billion berries. I mean, the guy is the first person in the story to kill an admiral. I think this bounty is justified. So now that Garp has a bounty and is on the run, does that mean he's going to become a pirate? Not so fast. Although Garp's life is now turned upside down, the fact is the guy still hates piracy and doesn't really care about treasures. It's more likely that he would just roam around the sea by himself and stay out of trouble. If any Marines were to find him, he'd be careful not to hurt them and would just run away. With time, Garp would realize how it feels to be on this side of the law and that celestial dragons are even worse than he thought. He would slowly understand why Dragon became a revolutionary and would seek to meet with him and join their efforts in freeing the world. Man, I'm kind of sad this scenario didn't actually happen in the show. It would be so cool! However, one scenario even cooler than this would be what would happen if Luffy awakened Gear 5 in episode 1, which you can watch by clicking right here.